Welcome back everyone, Oz here. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Before we get into today's video, I need to say that some of the acts that happen in these stories are illegal, so don't try them at home. And with that being said, today we're going to be taking a look at r/NuclearRevenge. Today I screwed up by potentially ruining my ex's life. So this is actually collectively a few days worth of screw ups. First off, background story. Ex cheated on me for 2.5 years worth of our 6-year relationship. I found out by a mutual friend of ours accidentally spilling the beans. She lived with her parents on the other side of the state when I moved away for college. Important later. Relationship over at that point. Fast forward to about a few months ago when I was cleaning out my apartment to move again. Found a ton of her stuff, including various adult toys, including a harness and restraints. Put it all in a box intending to get rid of it. Super resentful of her at this point. Her parents are super conservative Christians living in a Bible club area on a lake. People would go on like getaways there. I'm not entirely sure of the terms it's actually called, but that's how I understand it. Anyways, cue one bad day of drinking and venting to a vengeful girl who hated her guts from day one. And she gives me the idea to ship all her toys to her address with dad's name on the box, with a letter that states exactly what happened and why I stopped seeing her, etc, etc. Didn't think anything of it, signed off with your daughter left a few things at my apartment, she might want them back to help her life with John. Dad received the package Friday, messaged me today saying thanks for making me aware of what my sinful daughter has done to you. Please don't think bad of us, we were unaware this had happened. The situation has been taken care of. Turns out, taken care of means kicked out of the house and entirely excommunicated from her family. Her parents want nothing to do with her and won't speak to her. She's now homeless and has nowhere to go because basically John doesn't have the space to take her in yet. So, not only did I get back at her in the most spiteful way, I may have ruined her chance at a stable life, and heaven only knows what will happen here on out. Nobody screws with my dog. This took place way back in 6th grade, towards the end of the year. I live on the same street as this kid I will call Dan. I have a dog that is about 7 years old and loves being outside to play with the neighbor kids during warm weather when everyone's out. Well, on some random day of the year, Dan must have been feeling edgy because he came out of his house and just beat the hell out of my dog with a plastic bat, right in front of my sister. She ran into the house bawling, telling us what just happened. We ran outside and picked up our dog and rushed him to the vet. After not too long of a wait, the vet came out and told us our dog was alive and that he should recover over the next week or two. Now, my parents were angry, and they took this to Dan's parents, explaining what he did to our dog. They seemed to be understanding of the situation and told us that they were sorry and that they will punish Dan severely. But I was immensely furious. This did not satisfy my anger towards Dan at all. Now here's the deal, I never really liked Dan. He was pretty dickish at school, we were both in the same grade, but not necessarily towards me, but towards my close friends. And I guess I had been ignoring it for far too long. We were in the same grade, and something the school does every year for 6th graders is have a big science fair towards the end of the year, and everybody tries to make these super elaborate projects. This is where I start my master plan. Once everyone was getting close to finishing their projects, I look around the classroom to try to locate Dan's project. His is along the lines of some sort of aerodynamic rocket that travels really fast down a clothesline in a small amount of time. Perfect. I check out the rocket and the rocket has a fuse. Too perfect. That night, I go home and look at my firework inventory I had left over from last year's 4th of July. Sure enough, I still had a huge belt of firecrackers left. So, I went over my plan on what to do. After school the next day, I dissected Dan's rocket and put in as many firecrackers as I could and made sure that they would be set off once the fuse was lit. I put everything back together as if no one had touched it at all. Skip ahead a few weeks and it's the day of the science fair. It took place in our gym and we were supposed to be next to our projects all morning as the judges came around to judge them. So, from my point of view, I couldn't see where Dan was presenting, but I paid close attention to every noise in the gym. About half an hour into the science fair, I heard an enormous explosion from the end of the gym and a loud crash. The blast was stronger than I had thought. The rocket was obliterated along with Dan's hearing. One of the beams that held the clothesline fell over and broke some glass on some other poor kid's project. There was a lot of shouting, and all the adults rushed over to that end of the gym to see what had happened. I stood perfectly still. I just sat there giggling at my handiwork, knowing how traumatized Dan must be. I felt no sympathy, only villainous satisfaction. So this story was originally posted as a pro-revenge story, but just because of its contents, it has the honor of being escalated to nuclear revenge. This is a long one, folks, so buckle in. When enough is enough, people lose jobs and go to prison. This pro-revenge took place when I was in high school in the mid-2000s, a time in my country when there was much public outcry over bullying, hazing, and boarding schools. A couple of students in different schools had died from injuries resulting from bullying. Other schools were rioting and burning stuff. They were under increased scrutiny. It was a whole thing. Personally, my life in high school was not fun. I was a fat boy with low self-esteem going into my first year. The bullying I experienced quickly led to depression. I was prone to self-harm and reckless and a bit of suicidal ideation. The thing that made high school particularly nightmarish though was the sexual abuse. Low-key comments about my sexuality from this group of about 5 boys in 4th form. They called me and my best friends gay. The social stigma associated with homosexuality here is really extreme. The boys would stalk and terrorize me. They left threatening notes under my sheets. "We're going to fuck you up for being a fucking gay. We're going to fucking rape you," etc. So I only had one close friend who knew what was going on. Ironically, after an entire term of convincing everyone that I was gay, this same group began sexually abusing me. I'll spare you the details, but my first year in high school was the worst time of my life. But you're not here for my sad story, so moving on. Sometime in the middle of the term, the vice principal, VP of our school, was changed due to the aforementioned public backlash from the bullying scandals. The previous VP was a decent man, but the new VP was not. He came with a well-earned reputation of being unnecessarily harsh, dishing out suspensions and expulsions like candy on Halloween. The last straw. A few weeks after the new VP came in, and I'm having an incredibly bad week that is really battering my mind. Yes, the bullying and sexual abuse was still going on. Now, every Friday night, a group of kids used to climb through a window into the computer lab and play video games. The windows had bars on them, but a slim person could fit through. I am not slim by any definition unless the definition is fat. Among this group of kids was this troublemaker dude in my class and my dorm with the same common name. Turns out the VP had confused the two of us, and I was the one who was in his crosshairs. That Friday the kids were caught. Some of them, including my namesake, managed to escape. The VP was called in and the students who were caught snitched. Security was sent to the dorms to bring the other culprits. Cue me being woken up at 3 a.m. in the morning and dragged to the scene of the crime to endure a beating for something I hadn't done. Corporal punishment was technically legal then and now. My explanation that there is clearly no way for me to fit through the window were met with more cannings. What really pissed me off was that VP had us bring our belongings to his office at night for an inspection with the excuse of searching for stolen computer equipment. He came across my very private journal, and, like the dick he was, he proceeded to ridicule me for having a diary in front of the teachers, watchmen, and the students I was bundled with. It didn't help matters that I broke down and cried in front of them. I don't think I have ever felt such humiliation in my life before. The following morning, we were suspended for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, my parents took me back to school. I had only told them of the mistaken identity that I suspected and the wrongful accusation. They already knew about the bullying. I didn't tell them about the VP going through my diary or the sexual stuff. I was still writhing in humiliation. The VP, being the absolute bunghole that he was, had convinced himself that I was the ringleader of this group of boys. Again, mistaken identity, and thus deserved extra punishment. He ordered me to clear out a large patch of weeds and overgrown grass between the rugby pitch and the hockey field, about the size of a football field, using only a slasher. Just as I'm about to head out, it starts raining and it's the middle of July. So much cold. Temperatures regularly dipped to below 10 degrees Celsius at night. So, instead of going to the field, I head to class to wait out the rain. A few minutes later, the VP barged in furious, interrupting the geography lesson. He proceeded to tear me a new one, even mentioning my private journal. And then, he threatened to expel me if I left the field before I finished my punishment. Mind you, this was one of the best schools in our region. It had actually been my first choice. He then proceeded to cane me again just to make his point stick. At this point, I just broke. All of this punishment was due to something that I had not done. I was completely innocent, but this asswipe just couldn't listen. The ridicule, the humiliation, the bullying, and the abuse all just came to a head at that point. And I decided to just fuck it all to hell. So I walked out into the rain, slasher in hand, with not even a sweater. This was about 4 in the afternoon. I never returned. I think the VP never really expected me to complete the punishment. But then, I doubt he had ever met someone who decided they had no more fucks left to give either. My initial plan was to crucify him with his own words. Dusk fell with me cold and drenched, ripping up ferns from the ground. By midnight, I was shivering and crying uncontrollably, and it was too dark to see anything. I still persevered and started blindly cutting the grass, driven by this mad desire to just hurt. I really didn't care who I hurt. Sure, a part of my motivation was that if I did get sick out here, the VP would be in a fuck of trouble. But there was another part of me that was just like, fuck it, life sucks anyways. By midnight, I was too cold to continue. I ran out of energy and just sat down under a tree. Towards dawn, I was so cold from the rain and the wind that my shivers began reducing. It was impossible for me to sleep. The teachers finally found me there a couple hours after dawn. Apparently, the teacher on duty had found my desk empty during morning study time, between 4:30 and 6 a.m. When he asked where I was, it came about that I had not been in bed the previous night either. He then called the VP and the other teachers, who began searching the school, and they finally found me in the field. The Pro-Revenge. I don't remember much about what happened immediately after. I was so out of it. I do remember the teachers rushed me to the school nurse, who immediately recommended I be taken to the hospital. I spent a week there due to complications, pneumonia, and a very expensive week it was. All on the school's dime. My parents were pissed as fuck, and I couldn't blame them. The school's board of governors convened after my parents contacted them. The days before my parents and I were called to speak before the board, I had the idea just to face my fears and put everything out in the open. I was just done with that school and everybody there. So, on that day, in front of a group of musty old men in the boardroom, I finally shed my burden. I told them everything, my only motivation being to bury that VP and my tormentors. I don't think I've ever done anything that scary before. From the mistaken identity, the suspension, the punishment in the rain, the threat to expel me if I decided to seek shelter, and the crown jewel, the bullying, and the sexual abuse. I laid it all out. I knew that would definitely get their attention. The board called my best friend, who backed me up. The VP was in no position to win a he said, they said contest with us at that moment. The VP was fired that day. A few days later, a zero-tolerance policy on bullying was announced. I think the board was actually afraid of finding themselves in the news for all the wrong reasons. They didn't want their school to be one of those schools, despite the fact that it was one of the worst. Over the holidays, my friend told me that things got really serious after that. People didn't know why, but suddenly any act of bullying was met with immediate and unconditional expulsion. As for the boys who had been terrorizing me, they were arrested. My dad went to the police with threatening notes I had been receiving all year long. The school board supported us in this, on the condition that we, my parents and I, do not take the story to the media. I was happy with that arrangement. I had no desire to be the face of male rape victims. Oof. We had a few meetings with an investigator from the public prosecutor's office. A couple of months later, the office reached out, told us that the boys had pled guilty. One of them got off scot-free because his dad was some senior army guy. Corruption, shake my head. 3 of them got 10 years each. The last one got 18. The topping? They were all in their 4th and final year. They got arrested just as they were about to sit for the national exams to go to university. Their lives are ruined, and I have absolutely no remorse for them. And neither do I. Thank you for checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and until next time, I'll see you later.